Good evening, everybody. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to continue on in our study through the book of Job, and so we're going to be in Job chapter 28 tonight. And I don't know how far we're going to get into this. There's a lot of imagery in this. Chapter 28 is sort of a long chapter. There's sort of a main idea, but there's a lot of imagery. There's a lot of imagery to this. And so again, well, and I talked about this maybe a couple weeks ago. In Job chapter 26, Job started his response to Bildad, and his response to him, and then sort of broadened his scope to address the three of his friends, Bildad, Eliphaz, and Zophar. And in 26 through chapter 31 are again sort of Job's very long response to his friends, and so Job is going to there's a lot here over these next few chapters, and so we're gonna work through those kind of as we can. But this is going to be until chapter 30, I think maybe 38. Let me check and make sure here, because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. Chapter 40. This is the last time we're going to hear from Job until chapter 40, and then Job will respond, and then God will respond again. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first four verses here, and then kind of briefly talk about them. What we're going to do this evening is we're just going to sort of work our way through the chapter. This is not going to be so much an inductive word study type thing, but more of just sort of looking at the overall idea of the chapter. This is what Job says. He says, "Surely there is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death. He breaks open a shaft away from people, in places forgotten by feet. They hang far away from men. They swing to and fro." And so Job is sort of setting the stage for placing value on wisdom. And what he's saying here is surely there's a place where we get silver. There's a place where we get gold. You know, we mine for these things. And it's just interesting. He says there's a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. There's this place where we go to get gold and silver, and then there's a place where we go to make it, where we can wear it, or where we can use it, where they take silver and turn it into, in Job's world, probably coins and probably some jewelry. Gold, most likely the same thing. And so he says there's a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. He says iron is taken from the earth and copper is smelted from ore. And so iron, again, you know, it's mined, it goes through this process. Copper, you know, they would take this ore and they would sort of melt it down and come up with copper, which again they would use probably for jewelry and for some decorations. Iron, of course, would have been used for weapons and things like that. And so he's sort of talking about where these precious metals, where these important metals, this sort of the origin point for them. And he says, man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death. And he says, man looks for these things. Man puts an end to darkness. Man relentlessly pursues these things. He searches every recess. He looks for ore in the darkness and in the shadow of death. Even when it could cost them their life, man is looking for these things. Man is searching for these things. And you know, and we see this even now, literally, where mining is a very dangerous industry. You know, you hear occasionally where a mine will collapse and people get trapped in those things. And even more so, of course, you know, several thousand years ago when it was, you know, when it wasn't like it is even now. And so he says, man is really going after these things. Man, you know, even at the risk of death, man searches every recess for ore. Man searches for these things. These metals are very important to people. It says he breaks open a shaft away from people, in places forgotten by feet. And this is sort of a way of Job saying that that man even goes out where no one else has gone. Man is willing to go out on his own, or away from civilization, away from anybody, in places where nobody has been. Talking about the sort of the drive that man has to look for these things. And then in verse 5, he says, "As for the earth, from it comes bread, but underneath it is turned up as fire. Its stones are the source of sapphires, and it contains gold dust." And then he goes on and he sort of broadens his picture out. And even he says that, for even the earth, even the world that we know, from it we get bread. Underneath it is turned up as by fire. And probably he's talking about sort of this kind of the natural process by which these minerals or these metals were created, and so sort of this again, sort of this fire, this kind of underneath the earth that kind of creates these things. That we know now that there is there kind of is a fire in the middle of the earth. It's extremely hot. There's a lot of pressure, and that's where we get volcanoes, and lava is from this heat that sort of works its way up through the crust. So again, just an interesting geological note there. He says, "As for the earth, from it comes bread." So we know where mine and silver comes from, or where gold and silver comes from. We know where iron comes from. We know where copper comes from. We know that man is willing to do anything to get those things. We know that as far as the earth goes, bread comes from the earth. Underneath is turned up as fire. Its stones are the source of sapphires, and it contains gold dust. The earth, the dirt that we know, the ground that we walk on, creates these things. It gives us bread. It gives us sapphires. It contains gold dust. And of course, this probably is maybe an allusion to kind of the gold that you would find, like if you're panning for gold there, it's sort of the specks of dust the specks of gold that you would kind of gather up. And he says, "That path no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. The proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it." And so he's talking, as he goes on, what he's really talking about is he's saying that sort of where all this comes from, nobody really knows. He knows that there's an origin to it, but sort of how it works, how the earth produces this stuff. He says nature doesn't know. No bird knows. The falcon's eye hasn't seen it. When he says the proud lions, he's saying literally the sons of the pride, and figurative of sort of these great lions. He says the proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. He puts his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden, he brings forth to light. And so now what he's doing is he's shifting his focus to say, we know where all of these things, there's a place where all of these things that we value come from. There are mines for silver. There's places where gold is refined. Iron is dug up from the earth. Copper is smelted from ore. Man searches relentlessly for these things, and he's found them, and he goes as far out as he can go, even at the risk of death, to find these things. And then he goes in and he talks about the earth and how the earth provides bread, and the earth, the stones of the earth are the source of sapphires, and there's gold dust. And sort of we know that all of this comes from the earth. But then he says, again, going back to verse 7, that path no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. Nature doesn't understand how this works, and we don't understand how this works. And then in verse 9, he shifts gears a little bit, and then he starts talking about God. And he says, man is looking for these things. Nature doesn't know where it comes from. And then he says, he puts his hand on the flint. That God puts his hand on the flint. God overturns the mountains at the roots. God cuts out channels in the rocks. The most famous example of this is the Grand Canyon there. Sort of this this massive canyon. where water has just gone through for millennia and sort of cut that out. And he says, he cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden, he brings forth to light. And so he's saying that God is the one that's in control, that God has all of this power, that God is the one that designed all of this. And this is really, again, sort of a response to his friends who have sort of accused Job of not knowing God and not understanding God. And again, and it goes back to their impugning of Job's character, implying that he sinned. And because of that, that there's some ignorance there, and so Job is really trying to let them understand that he really does know about God, and he really does appreciate God's power and God's God's sort of God's position as God. And then he goes on in verse 12. He says, "But where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding?" And he says, we know all of these things. We know where all of this stuff comes from. And we can go back and we can mine for all these things, but God is the one that has created all of this. God's the one that creates the silver. God's the one that creates the gold. God's the one that sees every precious thing. He's the one that made it where we could find it. He's the one that has put his hand on this. He overturns the mountains at the roots. God is the one with all of the knowledge and the power. And he says, but where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? And even though we know where all of these things go, the implication there is his friends don't know where wisdom comes from. And he says, man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. Verse 14, the deep says, it is not in me, and the sea says, it is not with me. It cannot be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, and the precious onyx or sapphire. Neither gold nor crystal can equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. And so now Job is saying here is Job is saying, man is willing to risk his life to look for all of these things, but wisdom is so much more valuable than those things. Wisdom is so much more important than those things. And he says there's no amount of gold that could measure up to what wisdom is worth. And he says man doesn't know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. But wisdom is not rooted in people. We didn't create wisdom. We're not the source of wisdom. In 2020, it seems like everybody that has a Twitter account thinks that they're the source of wisdom. If you don't believe me, post anything on Twitter and see how many people agree with you versus how many people disagree and want to argue. And I've talked about this on Sunday mornings. You could get on any social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything like that. You could say that the sun is yellow or the sun is orange, and somebody is going to dispute that and say that the atmosphere filters out the color, and that actually the sun is more of a greenish bluish looking color, but because the rays going through the atmosphere and it absorbs some of those, and what filters through is orange and yellow, and you don't know what you're talking about. You probably get called awful names because you said the sun was orange or yellow. And so again, if you in 2020, everybody thinks that they're their own source of wisdom. And we even see this sort of in this modern movement where we think that we're the smartest generation that's ever lived. We're the most knowledgeable people, that we are the most informed and the most intelligent society that has ever existed. And there's something very dangerous in that. And Job's friends have sort of fallen into this same trap. The friends have sort of established themselves as having this wisdom, of having this knowledge of God, and Job doesn't. And they're smarter than Job, and they know what's going on with Job. And if Job would just listen to him, then his life would be fixed. Well, Job is saying here that they're not as wise as they think they are. They don't have this wisdom that they think that they have. And he says, but where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. Man doesn't know what it's worth, and man can't find it by looking at man. And there is an incredibly deep truth here to understand that wisdom, one, is incredibly valuable, and two, wisdom is not found with us. Wisdom did not originate with us. There have been incredibly smart people throughout the course of history. None of them sort of created wisdom. And he says, and I want to go over this again. He says, nor is it found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me. And it's, he's personifying all of these different things. The deep says, it is not in me. And the sea says, it is not with me. It cannot be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir and precious onyx or sapphire. Neither can gold nor crystal equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold. And so Job again is sort of placing this value on wisdom, and I think that this is incredibly important here for us to remember that, and to understand that wisdom really is that valuable. Wisdom really is worth more than what we can give it material worth. He says, neither can gold or crystal equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. He says, not to even mention coral, not to even mention quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. And so Job again is sort of leaning into where wisdom comes from. And sort of the origin of wisdom. Verse 20, he says, from where then does wisdom come, and where is the place of understanding? And he goes on, and verse 21, it is hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Destruction, and I love this, destruction and death say, we have heard a report about it with our ears. Even destruction and death, again, he's sort of personifying all of these things. And he said, even destruction and death have said, we've heard about wisdom, but we don't know where it is. Again, wisdom is one of those things that it is something that we do have to seek out. If it were there sort of to be discovered, then everybody would be wise, and we probably wouldn't live in the world we live in now. But he says, it's hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Destruction and death say, we have heard a report about it with our ears. Verses 23 through 28 say this, God understands his way, and he knows his place. For he looks to the ends of the earth and sees under the whole heavens to establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure. It says God understands wisdom. God knows his place. God knows where wisdom came from, because God is the origin of wisdom. Wisdom is God. Wisdom is in God. Wisdom is God is sort of the origin point for wisdom. He says, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees under the whole heavens. Again, sort of circling back to sort of this omniscience and this omnipotence and this grandeur of God. And he says, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees under the whole heavens to establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure. When he made a law for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt, then he saw wisdom and declared it. He prepared it. Indeed, he searched it out. And to man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. And what an incredible truth here. He says that God established a weight for the wind, that God is the one that tells the wind how hard to blow, that God is the one that gives the wind its force, if it's a light breeze or if it's a hurricane. God's in control of that. He established, he apportioned the waters by measure. God in his sort of creative and sort of this creative act that he did when he created the waters. He apportioned the waters by measure. He basically put as much water as needed to be in the oceans and in lakes and in rivers and all of these things that God created this, and God specifically allotted the amount of water that we have on the earth. And he says, when he made a law for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt, he's the one that controls the rain. He's the one that tells the thunderbolt, the lightning, where to strike. Everything that happens, God understands and God sees and God is involved in. And this is really interesting. Again, sort of talking about this idea of God being kind of in control of sort of these forces of nature that for us can be scary and overwhelming. One of my kids, every time it thunders, it's, oh no, there's this fear. There are, is a tornado coming? What's going to happen? Are we going to lose power? There's this very innocent sort of fear of these things that we see in nature, and even the biggest things that we experience, the strongest hurricanes, the biggest tornadoes, the lightning bolts, the rain, everything. God but God is in control of that, and God is bigger than that, and that's all sort of apportioned and controlled by God. And he says, then after all of this, after creating the winds and seeing everything in the earth and apportioning the waters and rain and lightning and all of these things, he says, then he saw wisdom and declared it. He prepared it. Indeed, he stretched it out. God prepared wisdom. God stretched it out. God is the one that gives us wisdom, but we have to seek it. We have to look for it, and we have to find it in him. And he says, he prepared it indeed. He searched it out. And to man he said, and verse 28 is one of those verses that really, you should probably put it like on a Post-it note and stick it on your desk or maybe on your mirror. And to man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to depart from evil is understanding. And this is a both and. He says the fear of the Lord, the reverence of God, the understanding of who God is, this for lack of a better term, this respect for God's authority and God's power and God's knowledge and God's sovereignty and all of these things about God, that fear, that's wisdom, because we understand who's in control. And if we understand this, then what happens is we understand the origin of wisdom. And what that should do is that should force us to lean into him for that wisdom. That should force us to look to him for that wisdom. And he says, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Understanding is putting wisdom into action. And that's really what he's talking about here. He says the fear of the Lord is wisdom, but understanding is to depart from evil. So there's this sort of this emotional, this mental, this psychological kind of understanding of what wisdom is, and that's the fear of the Lord. And then when we put feet to that, when we put that wisdom to action, then to depart from evil is understanding. That's the understanding of wisdom, the practical application of wisdom. And so I love that verse there. Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from it is understanding. And I think if we get this, then what happens is, I know in my life, if I really understand this, then I avoid a lot of landmines in life, because I know I don't have all the answers. And when I'm looking at a situation that may be stressful, overwhelming, dangerous, if I'm going, okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I'm treating myself like I'm the origin of this wisdom, then what happens is I'm going to make the wrong decision every time. But when I understand that God is the source of this wisdom, that God is the origin of this wisdom, then what happens is I can lean into him and I can trust his wisdom. And the best way to do that is in his written word, is in the Bible, is understanding that this is the clearest way that God communicates to us, is through his written word. And the fear of the Lord, that respect of God, that reverence of God, that placing God in a position where he belongs is wisdom. That's where wisdom starts. And departing from evil is understanding. And when we do that, then what that does is that puts us in a position to depart from evil, to flee, to resist the devil, to turn towards God, and to reject evil and to embrace him. And I think this is sort of a direct rebuke to his friends who think that they're the source of wisdom. And what Job is saying is, God is the source of wisdom, not you. God knows everything, not you. And Job's saying, I understand this. And he's saying, what Job is really saying is, I fear the Lord and I see the wisdom in that. And because of that, I'm departing from evil. And Job's reminding his friends that he understands that. So that's Job chapter 28. Job and 29 through 31 is a very long passage. Job is sort of going to give his closing argument. If this is a trial, Job would be the attorney that's sort of talking to the jury for the last time, and he's going to really sort of bring everything together. And so we're going to spend the next few weeks going through those chapters. So anyway, there's Job chapter 28. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and hopefully we'll see you Sunday morning for worship. Y'all have a great week.